Pittsburgh Steelers versus Tennessee Titans Week 4 matchup canceled. This is the reaction video. We're also going to be giving you, because a lot of people, fantasy football-wise, are really up a creek right now. So we got some fantasy football streamers. If you're one of the unfortunate people that has like Derrick Henry and James Conner and maybe JuJu or somebody like that, we got you covered because your roster is in a bind this week. But first, let me react to this. I know this is a polarizing topic. For whatever reason, it's a polarizing topic. If you think that people, these players should just suck it up and play and blah, 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 a couple things. First of all, your opinion doesn't matter in the equation, so I just want to throw that out there right now. The NFL is about preserving its income. The best way to preserve its income is to make sure they don't have an infection spread from one team to multiple teams. They're taking a page out of what happened with the early Major League Baseball season. They saw what happened when they played the games in spite of the Miami Marlins testing positive. They saw what happened to the St. Louis Cardinals when they tested positive, and they don't want a team basically canceling 2 or 3 games of its season. They don't want that, and frankly, neither do you. The smart move for the NFL was always to postpone this game. So as I'm going to say here, who has 2 thumbs, writes a fantasy football book, and saw this coming from a mile away? This guy right here. And if you're a fantasy football almanac reader, I don't know if you can see my shirt there. Hey, everybody, fantasy football almanac. If you're a fantasy football almanac reader, we've been talking about this all off season. As far as I could tell, I really honestly did not see a single other fantasy football service paying any attention to this COVID situation. It was always going to happen. This is not the last game that's going to be affected by this or impacted by this. You have 53 players. You have, in terms of traveling staff, about 100 people traveling for the NFL. That's in a weekly basis, on a 16-game basis, that's over 1,500 people are going to be traveling week to week. Somebody somewhere is going to slip up. The Titans, they're the first team to slip up. You see the Vikings are closing their facilities as a precaution. It's not going to be the last time this is going to happen. So what have we been saying all offseason in the Fantasy Football Almanac, and everybody who follows me? Draft for depth. If you went out there and you just tried to get one quarterback here and one running back here and wide receiver, you try to go through your first 5 rounds to have, 5 starters, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a quarterback, or whatever the configuration was, that was the wrong move. Draft for value, draft for depth. Do not draft for position. Do not try to fall in love with a player at a specific round, Tyler Higbee in the 4th round or anything like that. You draft where the value is. But for those of you who did not follow me in the offseason, for those of you who did not get the Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide, I do have a couple of sleepers for you this week just to try to bridge the gap between pain and when the Steelers and when the Titans play next, and we do hope that they will play next week. Week 4, they're not playing this week. We'll see what happens. The NFL woefully unprepared. They cram 16 games into 17 weeks. They do not have a week in between the end of the season, week 17, and the start of the playoffs. I don't think that's going to hold. We're going to have a makeup week for some of these weeks, and we'll be hearing that news drop, I'm sure, in the coming weeks when some of this stuff starts to get impacted. But let's get to stream plays, because if you have Tannehill or Roethlisberger as your starter, if you're in Superflex, you need somebody to start. You're looking for waiver wire. The best ones I have for you that you can easily find on the waiver wire: Teddy Bridgewater, who has not strung anything together yet to lead you to believe he can be an NFL quarterback, or at least a viable fantasy football starter. His matchup versus Arizona, this is the game that DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson should both have a touchdown. You got Mike Davis, who's a little bit better with his hands than you would think, still plugging in for Christian McCaffrey. Teddy Bridgewater should throw for multiple touchdowns this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Seattle is giving up a lot of yardage. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been a top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise 2 weeks out of the first 3 weeks out of the season. Look, I know you're not going to feel great about starting Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he is a viable play against a defense that is struggling in the passing game. Joe Burrow, Cincinnati likes to throw the ball. Jacksonville, I don't think it's a slam dunk matchup necessarily, but I love his weapons. A.J. Green, T. Higgins is coming on. You get Tyler Boyd, of course, who's questionable at this point. I like Joe Burrow this week against Jacksonville. Matt Stafford versus New Orleans. I know he's probably going to be taken and rostered in most of the leagues, but if he's there for you against New Orleans, again, in the passing game, they're giving up yardage. If Stafford has Golladay back, he's going to get better and better. Don't worry about the first 2 weeks. Look at last week, and I think things will move better for him. moving forward. And if you really are desperate, Nick Foles is next to zero in terms of ownership at this point. Playing the Indianapolis Colts, hate the matchup, but he has weapons. Jimmy Graham is a little bit better with him. Allen Robinson is better with him. You can play Nick Foles. Now, running backs, if you had James Conner, if you had Derrick Henry, if you had both of them, you are desperate this week. I think back to that Chicago and Indianapolis matchup, Nyheim Hines, I think Indianapolis will have to use running backs out of the backfield. I think Nyheim Hines will give us more of a stat line like we saw in week 1 than we have in weeks 2 and weeks 3. Let's see here. Freeman, Devonta Freeman, he's probably rostered at this point. But against the Rams, he will get more snaps than he did last week. He's had a full season of practice. Should be more of a factor in the passing game. Myles Gaskin still available on waivers. Everybody, I do watch all the games. Miami is a better team than you think they are. They opened the season against Buffalo and against New England. It's hard to score points on those teams generally. Gaskin has wrestled the job completely away from Breida and Howard. He is the most dynamic running back on the roster. They're giving him more snaps inside the 5-yard line. He dominates snaps when they're in shotgun and throwing the ball, and they're playing Seattle. They're going to have to throw the ball to running backs. That's Gaskin all day. And Carlos Hyde, depending on what happens versus Miami with Chris Carson, if he's injured, Hyde could be an easy snap up and play. I'm telling you, Gaskin is a fantasy football starter every week. This week in particular, if you're hurting, pick him up off of waivers. He's still only owned in like half the leagues. It's crazy. Wide receivers, Michael Gallup, I know he's going to be rostered, but he's a great play. Jamison Crowder might be a start tonight against the Denver Broncos if he can play. I think he's a start. Again, you don't feel great about it, but you got to do something if you have JuJu Smith-Schuster or A.J. Brown or Deontay Johnson like I have or whoever. You got to plug some of these guys in. Look to that Atlanta versus Green Bay matchup. Guys like Russell Gage, guys like Allen Lazard, guys like Valdez-Scantling, they can get you value off the bench. Play the matchups where you know there are going to be points scored. You could look at the New Orleans Saints and the like Emmanuel Sanders or Traquan Smith. Again, if you're desperate for a play, there is value in where the points are being scored. It's not rocket science, right? Tight ends, if you're getting screwed, if Jonnu Smith and Eric Ebron are your starters, you can still find some nice stuff off of the waiver wire. I've been talking about this Detroit-New Orleans game. Hockenson's the real deal. Galladay plugged back into that offense makes everybody better. Tonyan versus Atlanta. Again, look to that Atlanta-Green Bay game. Ebron, guess what? He isn't playing. Schultz versus Cleveland. I like that one. Richard Rodgers versus San Francisco. That's desperation, but Goddard is out. Philly still has no answer at wide receiver. 2 tight ends. Most of the value is going to go to Ertz, but Rodgers is your super desperate play. Defense and special teams. I know a lot of you have Tennessee. I know a lot of you have Pittsburgh, and now you have to figure out, crap, who am I going to play? Well, this week, snap them up now if they aren't already gone. Denver Broncos versus the New York Jets, and frankly, the Jets can be played against Denver. Both of these teams are struggling offensively. You got Rippon in his first start. I think the Jets are going to rush a lot. I think Rippon's going to throw interceptions. I don't care about the point total, although I think it will be lower scoring. Both defenses can be played. The Rams versus the Giants, you can play them. The Rams, they're probably already snapped up. They're my favorite stream play of the week. This could be a shutout, and you'll get sacks and probably turnovers. And then lastly, Seattle versus Miami. Although I think there will be points, Fitzpatrick takes sacks. Fitzpatrick throws interceptions. Seattle will score enough. Even if they give up points, and even if they give up yardage, which they have been prone to so far this season, they will make it up in sacks and turnovers this week, possibly even a pick six or a scoop and score fumble or a return for a touchdown. Seattle is good, everybody. I have them as a top 10 defense. And actually, I think they'll have season-long value once their secondary gets healthy again. So there you go. It stinks, but this isn't the last time that's going to happen. Follow the people who've been talking about this all off season. Underdog TV, Fantasy Football Almanac. We got you covered. Sign up for free updates. Follow me on Twitter, all that stuff. And we'll catch you again soon. Thanks, everyone.